In a quiet corner of Seoul, tucked between glass towers and buzzing cafes, stood a small, forgotten bookshop. Its wooden shelves leaned with age, and the scent of old paper lingered in the air like a memory that refused to fade. Eun-soo, a young woman with dreams larger than her world, worked there. She had always believed books could keep her company, even when life could not. Her days were simple, stacking shelves, sipping lukewarm tea, and watching the few customers who wandered in. One evening, as rain painted the windows in silver streaks, a man entered. He was tall, dressed plainly, his hair slightly damp. He carried no air of wealth or arrogance, only a quietness that seemed to belong to him alone. He chose a corner seat and opened a book of poetry. Night after night, he returned. Sometimes he read, other times he simply listened to the rain with the book unopened in his hands. Eun-soo began to notice the little things, how he traced the edges of the pages as if they held secrets, how his eyes softened when he smiled, how he always left the poetry section slightly disordered, as though he could never decide which poem to hold on to. They began to talk. First about books, then about life. She learned he loved verses about longing, that he hated the weight of expectations, and that he preferred the smell of old books to new ones. He never spoke of family, never of work. She didn't ask, she loved him as he was, as a man who seemed to find his home in words. Days turned to weeks, and her heart grew restless. She knew nothing of his world, yet she wanted nothing more. She didn't care if he was poor or lost. His presence filled the silence of her days, his laughter stitched warmth into her lonely nights. But one morning, the bookshop was flooded with light and noise. Expensive cars lined the street, reporters gathered outside, and Eun-soo's quiet stranger stood in the middle, dressed in a sharp suit, his face now bold and familiar on news screens. He was Kang Ji-hoon, heir to Korea's largest publishing empire. The man who had been hiding behind poetry and dust-covered books. Eun-soo stood frozen, her world tilting. But when Ji-hoon's eyes found hers across the crowd, they carried the same quiet tenderness that first walked into her shop. He walked to her, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the world, and whispered, "I came here not as Kang Ji-hoon, but as the man who found love between your shelves. Tell me, will you still read with me, even if the world knows my name?" Her answer was a smile through her tears. For Eun-soo had never loved him for who he was on paper, but for the man who sat in the corner, tracing poetry with his fingertips. And in that forgotten little bookshop, surrounded by whispers of stories past, they began to write their own.